Hello Internet folk, hello to the Tiddlerhood, and hello to the fans of basic programming language. Back on December 21st, or December 1st, I did a video about integrating TiddlyWiki syntax in basic programs, and that was just my first tries. I want to do a little bit of an update on that by showing how embedding TiddlyWiki syntax in a basic program solves a particular problem that I found related to declaring arrays and dimensions for those for those arrays. And and I also want to show a little bit of a revamp to the sample application that I had used back on December 1st. I'll be including a link to that old video from December 1st in the description below. Anyway, let's talk about a little problem I found in www.BASIC, the JavaScript interpreter, the basic interpreter built in JavaScript that's included in Basic Internet Machine. I've got a little program here that we're going to show three different options for declaring the dimension for this array, and we'll see the impact of those. This is a very simple program. All it does is, first of all, sets the option base to 0, so saying that array declarations, that by default the first element in an array is 0. And then we'll get into the three different alternatives for setting up the dimension for array A. Array B we'll leave as is, and then we have three printing setups. In the first round of printing, just before printing, we set the values of the elements for array A, and then we print each one of those elements to show that yes, indeed, they've got their values. And then we set up the elements for array B, and as a sanity check, we print off again all the elements in array A, and then finally we print off the elements from array B just to see what's going on. So as is, dimming the array for A with a dimension of 4. Let's see how this program works, what it gives us, and it lets us know that, look, okay, array A, elements 0 through 4, we've set those array elements to these values, and we print them off to show them. Then we set the elements of array B and do a sanity check, making sure that yes, array A still has those same values as before, and then array B, we see it's got those values. Now sometimes in programs it's nice to be able to declare a variable which reflects some kind of count to let us know how many bits of data we plan to process and how we want the array to reflect the size needed for that amount of data. So this is pretty common stuff in basic implementations, right? Set up a dimension based on a variable. Now let's take a peek and see how our program works using x to define the size of the array. Now as before, yes, A0, A1, A2, A3, A4, they're all the same as before, but after we set the elements for array B, we find that, okay, now A2 is no longer what it was before. A3 and A4, same thing. That these array elements now have values that come from the B array. And now what's going on, I did some digging in www.BASIC JavaScript and in that code, and I found that every time that we go and we dim an array using a variable to set the size of the dimension, www.BASIC for some reason translates this into a 1 or translates it into a 0, but then decides that, you know, it can't allow just one dimension and forces a 1. Either way, this variable here, instead of it being resolved as 4, for some reason as soon as we put the variable in there, A receives a dimension of 1. And because the arrays in www.BASIC are kind of, all of the array declarations, it's kind of like one big string of arrays. So the arrays are all strung together somehow. And these references to A2, just kind of, an A2 flows into the values of the next array that was set up. Anyway, all of that said, good luck me explaining any better than I did. Hard for me to word it. It means that array A, because an X is used here and the X cannot be resolved, it gets translated into a 1 somehow, which is what we see going on here. A0 and A1 are fine, but they're not after we set the elements for array B. So kind of a weird thing going on there, but there it is. Now, a lot of times this may not be a problem, but it is handy to be able to say, hey, look, we want an array to have a number of elements based on what's put in the variable. I don't think it's possible to fix well, I certainly can't fix www.BASIC to resolve this issue. One, don't know JavaScript that well, and I'm pretty sure, having looked at the code in the JavaScript code in www.BASIC, I'm pretty sure that fixing this would require a major rewrite of the entire JavaScript library. Now, instead of going there, I've decided to use a feature that I first described back on December 1st as I was experimenting, prototyping it. And the feature involves using some TiddlyWiki code, which will get substituted when the program is run. Now, if we look at this bit of code right here, all this is doing, this is TiddlyWiki syntax that's saying, hey, in this tiddler called array testing, which happens to be the program we're looking at, the array testing program, in this tiddler, get the value from field X. Now, if we run this program now with this bit of code instead of the one just we had a while ago, now we find that, okay, our code is working as it was with the literal 4 set as the dimension for the array. See, A0 through A4 is fine, A0 through A4 is fine, and the B array is fine. So this is a way for us to, it's a workaround to this problem of www.BASIC not being able to handle variables in the declaration of arrays. So a variable in the dimensions. Now, how does this work? Well, let's, what happens is TiddlyWiki, before feeding this program to www.BASIC, TiddlyWiki wikifies all of this, and wikification is a process by which TiddlyWiki resolves all TiddlyWiki syntax, evaluates all TiddlyWiki syntax, and replaces the syntax with the resulting values of that syntax. So in this particular case, TiddlyWiki, the wikification process, recognizes the 3 opening curly brackets and closing curly brackets. It recognizes this as a transclusion, which needs to be resolved. Now, when wikification happens, the basic program that we got here looks like this via the Wikify viewer. We see that the array that we've got here gets resolved and replaced by a 4. And once this wikification process is done, then the program is fed to www.BASIC, So now instead of sending an X, as we did in that second example we did a while ago, instead of sending an X to the basic program and having that X ignored and replaced by a 1, and now we've got a 4 that gets sent via this process. So instead of declaring our array size with a variable, we declare our array size with some TiddlyWiki code. So anyway, so that was kind of explained on the fly here. I'll have to write it up sometimes. I'm much better writing than speaking. But that's what's going on here, is using TiddlyWiki syntax to provide some values to dynamically change our basic program before it gets fed to the interpreter. Anyway, so this is the way to go when we want to, well, this is the way to go with basic anywhere machine when we want to declare values, variables, declare dynamic values for dimensions for arrays. There, that was hard to say. So anyway, so that's the little fix to the problem with dimensioning arrays with the variables. Instead we use TiddlyWiki syntax and values stored in tiddlers. Now before I go on to the next thing, let's take a look at array testing again, but through the native TiddlyWiki interface. And we look at array testing, there's the program, but if we edit this tiddler and we look at the bottom, we see fields for this tiddler, and there's the X field and the 4 value that gets put here during the wikification process. Now let's get back to the IDE and let's take a look at a revamped version of a program that I showed back on December 1st. And let's go find that program. Here it is. Now here I'm setting up an array, all arrays to be base 1, so the first elements are always 1, and then I dimension I declare an array here, setting the dimension to that array to a nice little filter going on that says, hey, get all of the tiddlers that are tagged with Mark's brother, right? Get all the titles for those tiddlers, and then count the number of titles. So we're setting the size of our array here based on data that exists inside of this TiddlyWiki. And then we set the count, count of Mark's brothers equal to the exact same thing. Why? Because we're going to use this count a little later in our loop. In our main program, we restore, and this is just something I like to do, is right away say that, look, we're going to be dealing with Mark's brothers data here in our data statements. And then for I equals 1 to Mark's bro count, which is the value that we got up here via TiddlyWiki syntax. So for I equals 1 to however many Mark's brothers there are, read the Mark's brother name or tiddler title into the array, this element position. Now let's take a peek at this program running here. You'll notice that in the data I've got another filter going on here, or a TiddlyWiki syntax going on here. And in this TiddlyWiki syntax we're saying, okay, look, let's get all of the tiddler titles for tiddlers that are tagged with Mark's brother, sort that list of titles, and then join those titles together into one string, the titles separated by commas. And just before, well, let's run it first. Let's see what it does. And the very first thing we do is we print off the source data, so the actual values that we get via these joins and these commas. So it's just a nice comma separated list. And the processing of this is exactly what will go into the data statement right there. And then we get to see that, okay, well, each one of these brothers were separated out and put into the array, into each element position. So Mark's brother 1 is Chico, Groucho, Gummo. Fourth one is Harpo. Fifth one is Zeppo. So this is showing us the output of the program. Now the wikification process will translate all of the TiddlyWiki syntax into values. So we see that the declaration of the array, instead of it this bit of, well, let's move some stuff around here. This bit of syntax, this TiddlyWiki syntax, got replaced by TiddlyWiki with resolving the syntax, resolves to 5. And same thing with the next one, right? Resolves to 5. Now down in the over in this print statement, forgot to mention we also had some TiddlyWiki syntax there. So what's inside those double quotes, this will get resolved to what we see over here. So that gets changed. And down in the data statement where we had this, TiddlyWiki resolves this to the string of names of the Marx Brothers, each one of these being a Tiddler title. And if we go and we take a look at the, well, there's nothing else to look at. There's the program, and here's how the Tiddly, oh yeah, okay, we looked at the TiddlyWiki viewer, we got to see how that gets resolved. So it's a way for us, not really going to be able to, we would never give this code to somebody who's using a different basic implementation, but we could share this code with all of the TiddlyWiki syntax resolved. What that is this is a nice way to make up for the fact that www.BASIC will likely never have all of the file operation statements that you'd see in regular BASIC, in other BASIC implementations. In this case, TiddlyWiki provides the data to the program. Oh, that's what I want to show you, is just quickly looking at the Marx Brothers tiddlers. And let's go find them. Tag Marx brother. And there are 5 tiddlers, and we go take a peek at each one of them. We get to see that, hey, now TiddlyWiki is providing the data to the BASIC program. Providing it not as the BASIC program is running, but provides that data within the BASIC program as the program is wikified first, and all of those TiddlyWiki references are replaced with actual data. So here are the 5 tiddlers that are all tagged with Marx brother, right? And all of these become data for our main program. Anyhow, this I find kind of cool. It all of a sudden juices up our basic program, so that TiddlyWiki is not only the host of the basic program, and is not only hosting the basic program and the interpreter, but TiddlyWiki is also hosting the data that will be fed to that program during the wikification process. Anyhow, a lot easier for me to write this stuff down than to say it, but I figured this is kind of worth showing. And that's it. So cheers, folks.